Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Kathleen Koch.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathleen Koch. If my face is familiar to you at all, I've been moderating at GlobSec for 10 years, but I was also a CNN correspondent for 18 years. So really excited about the topic that we are here to discuss today, foreign information manipulation. Now, I don't think there's a country on the face of the earth today that isn't grappling with this issue. I think we have to realize that it threatens not only our democracies, our electoral integrity, but also even sometimes the health and safety of our countries. Think about so much of the disinformation that flowed during the pandemic. Well, I'm really excited. We have a great panel to cover this today, but I want to start with a Slido questions. So if you have the app, if you would open it up and on your phone or computer, go to the Slido function, and the question is, which state actor engaged in foreign information manipulation are you the most concerned about? So fill in the blank. And as you work on that, I will call my panelists to the stage. First, Zoran Dimitrovski, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade at the Republic of North Macedonia. Kristin Kane, Acting Assistant Secretary for Global Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Outi, Holopainen, Under Secretary of State, Foreign and Security Policy at the Republic of Finland. And Marie-Doha Besancenot, NATO Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy. So, bienvenue, everyone. All right, so let's see if our results on Slido have come in. Okay, well, we can see them here, but if we could put them up on the screen. Voila, Russia, China, Hungary, Iran, very interesting. Excellent. I wanted to ask that question because in 2016, I led a discussion also at GlobSec on this very same topic. And at the time, the primary country we discussed was Russia, right? But times have changed. Times have changed, and it's become an equal opportunity practice. And I think our audience has named many of those who are very active in the space right now. But I mean, when it comes to states, but then we also have terrorist organizations as well, like Hamas, who are using this information warfare. But I'd like to start with Secretary Holopainen. Finland has very early experience with the trolling by Russia. Really, I think ramped up about 10 years ago with the annexation of Crimea, when they began backing rebels in eastern Ukraine. How would you say it's evolved since that time? How have the tactics changed?
Of course, we have even a much longer history with Russia and Soviet Union.
But I was saying that's when it ramped up, I think, when it got particularly bad.
Yes.
That wasn't when it began, I know that.
And propaganda has always been there.
Certainly.
But then, of course, I think the intensity of information influencing has grown. We definitely take note of that. And after the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and very soon after that, our application to NATO, to join NATO as a member, that I think increased the pressure from our eastern neighbor, also in that sense that we could feel it as an information influencing, and it stays on an elevated level. And even the volume, but also maybe like more structured, more targeted, and very much also trying to present Finland and NATO as a threat to Russia.
Deputy Minister Dimitrovski, I know that your country has also been very much targeted by Russia, but not only Russia. Share your experiences and how you've seen them change over the years.
Actually, even before the war in 2018, 2019, there was a comedian prank on our prime minister. They were Russian comedians who pranked our prime minister to its phone and representing themselves as Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine. And they reached him, actually. So these comedians also reached some officials in European Union, some even stakeholders, actually, some prime ministers of Europe. And this was a sort of later on, it was revealed that it was a sort of a hybrid threat, hybrid action towards our government. And of course, the intention was that people would not, that people would lose, that the government would lose legitimacy among its people. So they would, it would not be credible anymore. People started to make fun with our prime minister. I would not like to protect now my prime minister. It's not that I like him politically, but the problem was that the institutions of the government, the legitimacy of the government between people was attacked in order to sow disunity among people. And later on, it was revealed that it was a group actually that was connected with the Russian intelligence. One of the second examples that I want to speak about is actually after the aggression started from Russia in Ukraine, there was a ban in the European Union, I think in the United States, of the Russian-sponsored media. Russia Today, for instance, was banned. And there was an argument in our country whether it should be banned. I was a journalist then, and I wrote an article saying that, of course, we should ban it. Why? Because there should be no freedom for enemies of freedom. And it was very badly received by a huge group of journalists. They say, why? There should be news even coming from Russian broadcast, media who are sponsored by the state. And the people should themselves decide what is true or what is not true.
That's not easy to do.
That's
in
not
these
easy
days
to
and
do
times.
because my argument was then that not every, maybe we as a journalist or some political actors are well educated and they can differentiate between what is true and what not. They know how to look at the sources of information, how to discern between what is true, what lie. But ordinary people can do it. But in the end, it was banned, yes. But the problem was that Russia Today was broadcasting in English language. But we have in the region a lot of media who are sponsored by Russia. For instance, in neighboring Serbia, who are in the Serbian language and very understandable for us. And they also cover all social networks, and our media get this content from these electronic media portals and get it through the Macedonian public. So it is very difficult to defend yourself from the Russian narrative.
Well, let me jump down to Assistant Secretary General Besancenot. How do these cases compare to what you're seeing across the countries of NATO?
NATO is an interesting place to be, indeed, because we have all the allies sharing their own campaigns, the campaigns that they see in their own country. And we do see obvious commonalities between all the tactics used. Maybe this year, one thing to emphasize is, of course, scale and mass for obvious reasons, because Russia is not winning on the battlefield. We see it investing massively in the information space, and this translates into info operations. This is very visible. The other element we see is a combination of operations in the physical world and info ops. So taking the example of an operation uncovered in Germany this year, we have leaked documents from Russian Foreign Services SVR explaining exactly what the aim is. So organized protest, maximum 100 people, compensated by 100 euros each, but make sure you film everything and then disseminate the content massively on social media. And with a time frame, 4 to 5 weeks. So this is what we see a lot, and indeed at NATO we get a lot of feedback from the allies sharing precisely these tactics, techniques and procedures which we see. Another major trend which is very impacting is the fact that news websites are being faked, impersonated, and even journalists are being faked. So that implies the creation of a domain name, misspelling your favorite newspaper's name, and then with the use of AI, covers, magazine covers, looking very credible, and of course AI producing the exact type of illustration which matches the headline, so making it all the more compelling. So this is of course very striking across all allied nations.
Assistant Secretary Kane, does any of this sound familiar? Are we seeing the same trends in the U.S.?
Absolutely, and in fact, we have a couple country examples. Marie-Doha gave, I think, a good assessment of where the state of foreign information manipulation is. Maybe I can turn it just a bit to say what our government is especially focused on is international actions we can take together to combat it. So we are working with a number of countries around the world. For example, we have a framework to combat foreign information manipulation that we've signed with 20 nations just a few months ago here with Tony Blinken in Czechia, but from Côte d'Ivoire to Japan. And together we recognize that this needs to be a policy issue. We need to put together government structures to combat it, staff those with experts, work with journalists, NGOs, the kind of audience we have here at GlobeSec, and then work internationally. And these are efforts on top of, as you so well said at the top, things that we need to do as a society as a whole, because this isn't just a national security for our institutions and governments, but really for entire societies. So we're working also to support civil society, journalists, and others.
I know that Finland is often held up as an example. I'm sure many of you in the room are very familiar with that fact that you really start almost at elementary school level in educating your nation about the potential threat of disinformation. Talk to us, if you would, Undersecretary Holopainen, about how it's working. What is your secret sauce?
If I need to name one secret source, I think that this is this whole of government and whole of society approach to security and preparedness and resilience. It involves then the whole of government, all different authorities from different sectors, and their smooth cooperation and information sharing. So that is, of course, the one of the clues. But then also, obviously, we need to engage, and we have engaged for decades already the private businesses, which is now very much underlined because of the role of technology, but then also the organizations and civil society. So in Finland, we really try to work together. But then you mentioned the schools. So of course, education is the basis for everything that we have in our. It's the basis for our democratic system, and how we can really manage things well in our society. But I think the media literacy was included in the school curricula already in the 70s. So that is the basis. But then also in the relatively new government program, this current government started last year. So in the government program, there is also a reference to the need to and to the intention to enhance the training of teachers so that they could boost the competencies of students in exactly encountering disinformation and misinformation. So this is very much a topic on the agenda. But we have been working a long way, and I don't think there's any shortcut. We just have to keep on talking about things. One important issue, of course, is the trust in society, and so that citizens trust what they hear from the authorities. So if there is something that is worrying the citizens and people that live in Finland, so it is up to the authorities to be very clear about it and communicate also in other languages, because there are so many people in Finland who don't speak Finnish or the other national language, Swedish. So also taking into account the minorities that live in Finland and cannot really follow the dissemination of information in Finnish.
Deputy Minister Dimitrovski, I think your country's case is quite interesting, because North Macedonia has not only been a target of disinformation, but you've had homegrown domestic for-profit disinformation. I think many people are very familiar with what happened in 2016, and especially in the community of, is it Veles, is how you would pronounce it, where there were more than 100 political websites spreading fake news or appeals on divisive topics. They generated millions of views per month on Facebook, and the folks running them made quite a bit of money. How hard is it to stop that kind of activity?
Actually, it's very difficult, because it was funded probably by one of the candidates for American president, and in his favor, of course, and people earned a lot of money out of it, because they were running websites, and they would earn, for instance, like tens of thousands of dollars in a couple of months in the pre-election in United States, and otherwise they couldn't earn that kind of money. So they spread it all disinformation about the other candidate in the United States, as far as you know. Then was Mr.
Was your government even aware that was going on?
Nobody was aware what is going on after it happened, actually. So
right. I think we all read about it after it happened.
After
right?
it happened, nobody was aware, because it is very difficult to, in the end, to control what is going on online. And you can have a domain, and domain can be anywhere in the world. So you are staying at home and on your computer and producing news. Actually, they were not producing news; they were getting them out of someone else was producing news, malicious and pro one candidate, actually anti the other candidate in the United States elections. So we have this. The interesting point is that in the countries in Balkans, you can easily find people who can work for even for lesser money, just to do this kind of actions. And people openly, we know some of these people who worked on this, and they were not prosecuted at all afterwards. So there was still a threat. I know CNN and other companies were coming to Veles, and there were documentaries actually which were broadcasted, but. So it is not only Russia that is doing these kind of things. Even private and political parties and businesses were involved in spreading disinformation. But this disinformation was not spread in Macedonia. It was spread in the United States. Actually, it was for the United States audience. So one of the interesting phenomena which I want to stress here is that disinformation is coming from everywhere. It's not only coming from Russia. As for instance, one of the Putinian argument, for instance, Putin, if you remember, when he attacked Ukraine, his argument to justify the war was that this nation is artificial. This nation is not, it was invented in 20th century. This was not existing previously. So we should, so using a narrative and language which is ridiculous, I mean, which is completely unacceptable. But interesting enough, this kind of narrative was used. Putinian narrative was used against North Macedonia when it became candidate for actually in order to start negotiation by a European member country, so that our language is artificial, that we are not the nation. We were not the nation before 1945. And it was done by one of our neighbors, and even there are documents in European Union that are they submitted a document stating that our language is artificial and a dialect of their language. So I think that European Union is very vulnerable if it has double standards, and if it doesn't pay attention what is going with the narratives in its own microcosmos. So for the people in Balkans, because in Balkans it's very, very difficult to differentiate who is a friend, who is not.
This is a complex,
this is
complex problem.
Complex space. And even the word Balkan itself, so they adopted, the European Union adopted the word Western Balkans for these 6 states, and we are candidates for European Union, but they label us Western Balkans. But in the Balkans, where is Eastern Balkans? Eastern Balkans are Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey and Greece, but they are not Eastern Balkans. They are European Union. They are Eastern Europe. For instance, Bulgaria and Romania are Eastern Europe. Greece is Southern Europe. You have Central Europe there. And there is a narrative that people think the Balkans means something which is divisive, which means ethnic tensions, which means this is actually Europe is elitistic, Balkan is primitive. So we want a change of this narrative, which is everywhere in European Union countries, and people think of Balkans and labeling it Balkans, because in the political theory we know Balkanization means simply that.
Well, let's get back on track with the disinformation.
Sorry for my...
Assistant Secretary General Besancenot, what is NATO doing then to try to address this issue, the foreign malign influence? What steps are you taking? Are they working?
We have clearly made it a priority. And when I say we, I mean the nations. Of course, it has been assessed as a top NATO priority. It is part of NATO's strategic concept already since 2022 under the title of hybrid threats. And then our approach has been increasingly specific, of course, distinguishing different hybrid threats from that specific threat of info operations, malign operations in the information space. What we are doing is, of course, tracking all of that, and the allies have really prompted us to invest in the right tools. And of course, we work with the allies also, and we see how MFAs, MODs, or standalone agencies are increasingly investing in those tools to gain the right knowledge of what's happening in the information space and be able to see right away when let's call them campaigns, inauthentic use of social media or digital tools are happening, creating a peak of disinformation to accelerate political reaction and calling it out fast. So we clearly use our own tools to monitor this, but of course our mandate is focused on NATO, what is being said about NATO, and then we also work with the nations to both amplify their concerns when they do observe a campaign in their own nation, and to that end we have created an alert mechanism very close to the ones existing with the G7 nations, which has been created at the end of 2018 already, and very close to another one created by the External Service of the European Union. So ours is not a duplication, it's clearly plugged into these existing mechanisms, but because we are not Russia or another adversary, we do not use proxies, we do not pay troll farms, our strength is working together.
You can't fight them in the same way that they're attacking you, right?
So we need to coordinate, we need to share our situational awareness, and then we need to share that knowledge very fast to give our politicians the tool to appease national debates and assess the risk right.
Yeah, if I just may, in my first intervention, I more told about what we do on national level, but of course the international level is hugely important, and not least within NATO. And of course we need partners and allies to share information and help us to recognize what really is ongoing and what are the motives of our adversaries. So what is behind it? What is the real big picture? Because only then we can really counter and even try to prevent. But then also the cooperation in bilateral settings or other international settings. So of course we very much also appreciate the initiative of US, this framework, and which we also have joined as Finland.
I was going to say the United States this summer there was a lot of news on this. In July, the Justice Department said that for the first time it had disrupted a Russian propaganda campaign that attempted to use AI to inflame election year divisions in the U.S. There was also the campaign by the Iranians attacking both campaigns. By the Donald Trumps and also the vice presidents trying to hack them, and the federal government has gotten on top of a lot of these. So it sounds like in the U.S. there is a greater focus, greater involvement by the federal government than ever before. Is that what you're seeing and participating in?
Yeah, that's right. In particular, our Directorate of National Intelligence, working with Department of Justice, FBI, and then CISA, which is essentially our cyber agency. They were the ones working together that uncovered these Iranian efforts to, like you said, pervert both campaigns. As you noted, broke up a Russian AI bot farm, also looking to intervene in our elections. So definitely lots of lessons learned over the years. Definitely a whole of U.S. government approach, in addition to all the great international cohesion we have. On AI, I'd also maybe just say something I'm excited about is we're looking at content provenance, which sounds very kind of esoteric, but it's actually a simple concept, and it's a structure of rules and policy around how we label AI, text, imagery, etc. We know AI is already here. It's taking off in incredibly dynamic, big ways that so many parts of society are working. But what is our responsibility, getting back to that question of trust that's been mentioned here? We know that as a government, to keep our trust, we have to be honest. So as we use AI, how do we label it? How do we communicate with others so that they continue to have trust in what we do?
Undersecretary Holopainen, I'm wondering, as you look to the future, as you look at this threat that so many countries are facing, what worries you most? I mean, is it AI because of its ability to just create images out of whole cloth that support these incredible, perhaps hard to believe stories or narratives?
Maybe the main problem is the complexity of everything. So we are living in a very complex world, but of course technology is part of it. And since we don't know how really things are developing, so that makes us feel a bit insecure. But of course, I think we need a lot of cooperation with tech companies. We need a lot of cooperation with different experts and different, as I said already before, so the intersectoral cooperation within the authorities also, that's a must, and in the international cooperation. So we really need to see that the possibilities that technology offers us are used for the better, for the good of the mankind, and they don't become a real threat to us. So of course that is a big thing.
Deputy Minister Dimitrovski, there are organizations, nonprofits, journalistic organizations that really do try to ferret out this disinformation and reveal it in the light of day to try to stop it. And increasingly, they are becoming targets themselves of harassment, even physical attacks. I know there's an organization in your country called the Metamorphosis Foundation, where the journalists have suffered online attacks. They've had people approach their journalists in the night, threatening them. I mean, you were a journalist for 14 years yourself. Is there anything that governments like yours or any of these participating in the GlobeSec event can do to better protect these allies, that are helping governments, helping nations try to reveal this kind of malign activity?
Actually, there should be more remedies to to combating disinformation. One of these is these fact-checker organizations. But the problem sometimes is that some of the fact-checkers, because you need to have plurality of fact-checkers, because some of the fact-checkers incline to some political ideologies.
Right, and that's become an issue in the United States where some say, well, is it inaccurate or do you just not agree with it?
And if you're a fact-checker who are with conservatives, then, you know, you're fact-checking, but then you fact-check alternative facts, for instance. Or on the other hand, if you're a liberal fact-checker, so then you're fact-checking something which is pro-liberal. And this is an issue, and the problem with the media in general is whom to trust on the world level, not to speak about, but the democracies. There is a plurality of media in democracies, and we should stick upon the media which are not, let's say, state-owned or media, because the political parties can have some influence there who are in power, but also, and also the media who are corporate, because there are some corporate goals before telling the truth, you know. So they are also not telling the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But we should rely upon media who are mostly run by journalists, for instance, who are financed by the public, like British Guardian is for that matter.
Right. Public broadcasting in the United States.
Public broadcaster, maybe United States, which is not dependent on the political party which is in government or not on profits and that kind of stuff. And in the end, the problem with this, as I said, with these fact checkers is, of course, everybody is a target, and people, if you're doing your job correctly. So you can be a target, of course, if you want to really speak about facts and not about fiction, or to ideologize facts. So someone will be offended, and someone doesn't have any good intentions. Actually, people connected with private companies, political parties, nobody has good intentions towards the media, so they want to control the media. And in the end, what is important for the audience is that they should be educated well. So the media literacy, we started a couple of years ago to introduce it in the schools. Then the critical thinking. I'm teaching critical thinking on the graduate studies, but I think that as it is in the United States of America, there should be a subject in secondary school, critical thinking. So people don't know about logical fallacies. People don't know about many other stereotypes and stuff, are not educated, and how they enter the public sphere, actually.
Well, Assistant Secretary of Besancenot, I'm wondering, is there anything further that we can do by cooperating internationally to tackle this issue? Anything on your wish list?
So many things, but drawing from what has just been said, I think the notion of information integrity is something very, very central to many allies. Canada is very supportive of this. Some organizations, the UN's approach is very much centered on information integrity. I think the Netherlands also. So we all have different approaches, right? The EU was very much focused on democracy, election periods, regulation. NATO very much focused on those issues as part of national security, the UN more information integrity, but I think all of us are striving for this. So historically at NATO we've always invested a lot in independent press, independent media, in journalist tourist visits, having a maximum amount of journalists attending the political battle rhythm of NATO, so ministerial meetings every 2 months, and also the summits. But of course there's a more long-term long-term approach to it that we're learning from our newest allies. So Finland and Sweden are bringing a huge amount of knowledge in that respect to the whole alliance, and we are learning to build that resilience in the long run, whatever you call it, democratic resilience, societal resilience, and that of course comes with protecting independent media and then educating viewers and listeners so that they can tell propaganda from actual news. And yes, all organizations are now accepting that they do need to build on the skills of networks of fact checkers, investigative journalists, individual citizens who spend part of their time making lists of evidence, researching topics they feel passionate about, sometimes working at night, but really according to this beautiful philosophy of open source, which means that you can share the result of your research and you agree to the fact that it can be amended by others or questioned by others. And I think we still have a lot to learn from this community and that spirit, which is probably the future of journalism, but also the future of government communications also.
Assistant Secretary Kane, I'd like to go to you one last time before we go to the audience for questions and ask, do social media platforms have a responsibility to do more? In the United States recently, they have pulled back somewhat in what they were making accessible to the public and in the way of access to data about what was going on behind the scenes. And I know in the United States, we do not have something like the Digital Services Act that they have here in Europe that requires that these social media platforms give journalists, give researchers that kind of access to data about what's going on. It requires social media companies to also run risk assessments when they're introducing new technologies. Without those, do we need those kind of guardrails in the US? And if not, how are we going to get the social media platforms to do more?
Yeah, I think the United States has a bit of a different approach and outlook on this than our European friends, it's true. Our freedom of speech laws, as you know, incredibly strong, not just legally, I mean, so much is allowed really up to inciting violence, but I would say culturally as Americans, I mean, that's just been embedded in our society for centuries. I will say that doesn't mean we want disinformation, other unsavory elements, just open, free reign. Brad Smith actually spoke about this even earlier on a panel this week. My own bureau in the State Department has a close relationship with social media companies, and when we see something that's concerning, we do flag it for them. But I would also counter that there's the whole other side of information diplomacy, so to speak, and it's not just being reactive or doing the very important media literacy, which, as you noted, Finland's an example, but getting out as much truthful information we can to whomever we can in new, creative, wide ways, doing it in different languages. So I'm proud that not only the State Department, our MFA, but the White House, the Pentagon, we do almost daily press briefings to any member of the press who wants to come in, even state-controlled ones, even ones we don't like. They're welcome to just walk in, Washington, D.C., 23rd Street, walk in through the State Department doors. We do this in foreign languages around the world. We're trying to find creative ways to message, sometimes through influencers who we invite in. Don't tell them what to say. We're not like the Chinese. We invite you in. You can say whatever you want to say. But we're trying to get as much a affirmative vision of what we do stand for rather than just being on the defense, or I should say in partnership with being on the defense fighting foreign information manipulation.
Thank you. Well, let's go to our audience for questions. And I see a hand right here, and someone will bring you the microphone. If you would introduce yourself, please.
So, Emma Stasna, Synopsis. Thank you very much for this interesting debate. When we speak about disinformation and information manipulation, usually we mean Russian, coming from Russia or pro-Russian narratives. But we can also see that there are, for example, China as being the narratives used by China are very much converging with those used by Russia. Also, of course, we can see other information manipulation and interference techniques coming from such actors. My question is this being incorporated into strategies that actually maybe one-fit-all approach cannot be really applied because of completely different approaches of different actors. And also, for example, looking at Taiwan's elections of this year, and Taiwan's being really under the great pressure from FIMI coming from China, but given the fact that actually there has such a little influence over the election outcome, is there any cooperation or, for example, interest in cooperating with other actors who are facing FIMI or interference from globally that could actually be useful for the Western part actually struggling to protect, for example, elections and being targeted and affected by FIMI? Thank you very much.
Who would like to take that?
I can start and then pass it on. I would just say, to answer your question, I couldn't agree more that the disinformation by Russia can be quite distinct in the way that the Chinese operate, much more complicated. We see the Chinese, for example, co-opting local media organizations in Africa and other places, giving content, which is great. Lots of us like to do that. But when they give content saying that media entity must sign an agreement not to show, say, content from the United States or Europe, bringing journalists in to give complimentary coverage to China, but if they do anything negative, well, they're no longer invited. So we, as a government, we do separate the way we're looking at this, have experts who are working specifically on Russia, experts who are working specifically on China.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah, I could also add that, of course, the picture is very diverse, and there are many actors around the world doing different things. And I think we also, when we try to counter the activities, so we have to think what we are doing and what we are trying to counter. Of course, it's not only that there are like hostile governments trying to impose something on our people and us, but also they are often like authoritarian governments imposing something on their own people. And I spent 3 years very recently in the Horn of Africa and very closely was watching the government orchestrated campaigns against the West and how they were manipulating their own citizens to turn against the West and that kind of things. And of course, we see things like this within Europe as well. But let me just mention one example of a good example, a positive example. We had presidential elections in Finland early this year, and we didn't notice any foreign influence before the elections. And our reading of the situation is that let's say Russia saw that even if they would have tried to influence, there was not much to do because everybody is so convinced about Russia being the aggressor. And even if they would have tried to divide the political, like the spectrum, that would have not succeeded. But this was really a case where we didn't see any efforts to impact the elections.
That's fascinating. So you're saying if you had that level of, of awareness and education in advance in countries around the world, then people who are perpetrating these kinds of activities would just give up, perhaps. We have another question here in front.
Yes, thank you. I'm Louis Viranga from the Baltic Defense College in Estonia. My question would be to everybody. What would you say the ideal strategy would be to combat dis, and hostile information from established political parties in Western democracy who do have a legal mandate for free speech, and then countering their own narrative to say that this is the elites and they're lying to you, to counter kind of two narratives in parallel? Thank you.
Excellent question.
Maybe if I may, you're living in a democracy, and it's very difficult where the free speech ends and where the actually attack on your freedom starts. So, but the different political narratives, for instance, whether they're being conservative or liberal or whoever, anti-immigrants, anti-abortion, or some moral issues which don't really lie on facts, but on fiction, on some vision of these people who produce these either outward lies or disinformation, which is or misinformation in that on that matter. So I think that it is very difficult in a democracy to fight this. What you should do, you should educate people. This is one thing. The second thing, the government should be very transparent on what they are doing, as they are doing in the West. I mean, they should be very transparent. They should reveal the information to people, which is the true information. They should be more present with their public relation offices, accessible by all journalists. For instance, this is a problem in Balkans with some of the governments, which were not that much accessible. So journalists didn't have much access. But the situation is changing. I know that on the West, so there are also corporate entities who can also produce fake news and narratives which are not well received by the public, and they can do it on a daily basis. I mean, when I say on a daily basis, there is no definite answer, but you can protect yourself if you're an intellectual. You can use different sources, but if you're a taxi driver or a barber in a barber shop, then you can spread these lies about how the Putin's strength, for instance. That was the case in Macedonia. So Putin is a let's say strongholder, and the man who is a protector of Slavic and other people who are Christian Orthodox, and fighting against the bad West, which is imposing some liberal views on all over the world. So this narrative is present everywhere, even in the West.
Right. Anyone else want to take a stab at that?
Maybe just one word on this. I think what you're underlining is the paradox that at the same time we all realize this is about national security, so we're tempted to be very, vocal about it. On the other hand, most governments agree that MFAs, MODs, as tempted as they are, cannot be the only speakers of truth and have a very authoritarian way of presenting things, and that they do need multipliers and voices among civil society to tell the story in their own voice to their likes. So we're there. Indeed, it is about making our government decisions and our democracies more inclusive. And there are many attempts at doing that in different places. And actually, coming back to your question about international, yes, in Asia also about labs, democratic, giving more power to citizens. But yes.
We have 1 minute 45 seconds. Do we have a brief question here? I have one here from, I'll take the one that's online here really quickly. This is from Slido, from Heinrich Kreft, the first one that came in. In the military, some offensive capabilities are considered necessary for defense. Do we have or need some offensive capabilities in this field as well, and the political will to use it? We touched on that a little bit, but how can we and should we fight back in the same way?
Seems like he's specifically referring to military.
No, he's talking. Well, no, he's talking. Information warfare.
I mean, I think yes, we should absolutely be proactive. We should be looking at ways to fight back. We have found in our experience that it's not necessarily the key is to go after each bit and try to debunk it, but rather to make our societies strong, resilient, to work together. And we've spoken about a lot of these mechanisms.
Pre-bunking.
Pre-bunking, yeah. Right. And to support, just wanted to make an appeal also for resources, because ultimately, whether it's a political party or a country, it takes money and personnel to do this kind of work. And so we're trying to look at what resources a Taiwan or, Ethiopia or others might need and support them in this effort as well.
What,
Yeah,
Kathleen?
definitely, and strategic communication, of course, as part of these more offensive activities. But of course, we need to strictly stick to like our legislation, international law, rule of law, democracy, human rights, everything. So we will do it that way.
Right.
Yeah,
All right,
no,
well, I have to. We're going to
use
have to wrap it
military
because we are out of time.
Time's
And this
up.
is indeed the last session of the day, and I just want to let you know what's going on. So for those of you who are invited to the thematic dinners, you have to be ready at 6:45, and for those who are invited to the GlobeSec cocktail, the buses will leave from the hotel at 7:30. And then things resume in the morning, 9 a.m. sharp, with a discussion on Central Europe's role in the world. Thank my wonderful panel for this great conversation, and thank you all, and thank you for your questions.